I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands.
Welcome to Build an Iconic Life podcast. I'm your host, Chris Whitehead, and this podcast is dedicated to help you build a life with zero regrets by focusing on how you have everything you need to stand up, stand out, and live life on your terms. Let's dive right in. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Build an Iconic Life. I'm here with Regina Huber, who happens to be in France right now. She was born in Germany. She's lived all over the place. She is a transformational performance coach, and I'm just going to read really quickly a little bit about her. As a transformational leadership coach and CEO of Transform Your Performance, Regina drives bold, heart-centered leadership. She helps her clients and audience become thriving leaders by leveling up their leadership of self and others. She has books, which we'll talk about. We'll also put it in the description for you. Most importantly to me, because I'm also a coach, I'm a business coach as well as a mindset coach. How did you get into coaching? Like what is it that you did prior to coaching that said, hey, I really want to help people do this?
Right. As you said, I grew up in Germany in a tiny little village. I was always very adventurous, and this is what made me move so often and to so many places and live abroad. I ended up spending 16 years at the Boston Consulting Group in the past in several different locations. And this is how I started moving around, really. But later I moved with my own businesses as well. So I worked for BCG in Europe, Latin America, and the US. I opened 2 offices for them in Portugal and Brazil. And then I decided to take a different route. I left the firm. I was at their San Francisco office at the time. I moved to Buenos Aires, Argentina, to open my own business there. I hadn't been there before, but for a shorter period of time. And later I did the same in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, before eventually creating my current business, Transform Your Performance, which is based in New York City and which is all about coaching and training and inspirational speaking. And when I moved to New York City, I had gone through a very painful experience with a business partner in Brazil, which eventually cost me my business there. So I had to make that tough decision to give it up. It was a brick and mortar business, lots of cleaning up the mess to do. And I just try to figure out what the next chapter should be and how I could pack all this very eclectic experience on several continents into something meaningful, both for my clients and something fulfilling for myself.
That's beautiful. I also, so my parents got divorced when I was really young, and one of them lived in Northern Virginia, Alexandria. Another one lived in Southern Virginia, and I traveled a lot back and forth on weekends between them. As I got older, I was the opposite. I wanted to stay still. It makes sense. The problem that I was having is that there was this part of me that from a very young age, I did all of this traveling. And so I had a really interesting experience around 2008, 5 to 8, with the recession. We were flipping homes, and all of a sudden they're not giving home loans out to anyone for a while. Yeah. And I shut that business down and moved 1,000 miles away. And it was at that time that I realized that I had created my own ceiling, that I was holding me back from a life that I truly wanted to live. And I bet you can attest to this. The moving part wasn't hard. It was the fear of the unknown that stretching myself. But what I found in that process is I did fall down a lot. I did scrape my knee a lot, but I started picking up speed to become a better version of who I was because I had to in order to just survive. All of these moves that you made, did you feel anything similar to that? Or were you just like, woohoo, and everywhere you went, flowers showed up?
No, there were a lot of things showing up on my way. And I always took a ton of risks, So sometimes these risks have worked out, and at other times they haven't worked out as desired or as expected, as it sometimes happens, right? And I think when you talk about an iconic life, as you do, I call that my freaking amazing life. And it's not just always going uphill. It's not like that. It's just that life that we choose and that we think is right for us. And we make our experiences. I do believe, though, that uncertainty holds incredible potential. It holds a lot of possibilities that we might not even imagine before stepping into that uncertainty. That's why it's very precious to me, actually. So uncertainty and change is not something that I don't like. I of course, change always comes with a certain type of risk, but life is a risk.
It is.
It's just what it is. And if I limit myself by not taking risks, then I limit my life at the same time. So all my life, I have taken a ton of risks, right?
You know,
They gave me excellent opportunities for growth.
Tony Robbins says that there are 6 human needs. Um, the first one is consistency, but the second one is variety, which is the risk that you're talking about. And then there's
Mhm.
charity and love and other things down the road. But I think that a lot of people find themselves, I know that me in my 20s, right after college, I thought I was depressed. I
Mhm.
wasn't depressed, Regina. I was bored. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people end up getting into a routine that becomes a rut and they don't understand that they're not taking enough risks. What are some of the things so your ideal client shows up?
Mhm.
Number 1, who is your ideal client?
I mostly work with leaders in corporate.
Okay.
Okay. Not only, I work with leaders in corporate to help them advance their careers, advance faster in their careers, get promotions, all of that, become better leaders. This is actually my favorite work, my favorite piece of it, right? And I also coach business owners who want to level up their leadership skills and also, who really care about their teams. As you mentioned before, when you read my bio, I'm all about bold and heart-centered leadership. And also, of course, that implies people-centered leadership.
Yes.
And these are really my ideal clients, and I help them be more successful in their leadership, experience more freedom. I'm all about freedom. I always say all I do is in the service of freedom, and I also want them to experience more or greater fulfillment and live that freaking amazing life.
Yes. So is one of the things that shows up with your clients is that they aren't
Mhm.
producing enough variety in their life or even in their corporate career that they've gotten into that rut?
Absolutely. I think it's about not having enough of the activities they would prefer to have. A lot of my clients, when they come work with me, they sometimes face situations where they are bored because they do too much of the work that they should actually now be doing, to say it somehow, right? Like, for example, um, if a leader is constantly picking up the slack of their team, then that's actually not what they should be doing, right? Or
Yep.
if they do too much admin work because there's nobody there, the team is too small, or whatever the situation is. And oftentimes that also comes from them, not just from external circumstances, right? If you, for example, a people-pleasing leader, then you might have a harder time having those tough conversations with your team that you need to have, or just to really, structure everything. And most people, most of my ideal clients, they want to do more strategizing, more of the high level work, and they want to make an impact, they want to make a difference, but they find themselves so wound up in the daily routine because their workload is too big sometimes,
Yep.
and they can't find a way out of the rut.
I've definitely so I've been a business owner for 26 years,
Mhm,
and I definitely came from the people pleasing side of a
mhm,
business owner. I thought I understood the whole reason I became a business owner is I didn't like other people telling me what to do.
mhm,
I was a very driven young man and I wanted to make things happen. So I thought that by treating everybody with the same respect, that it would automatically be given back to me. But I learned over time that core values are very important
mhm,
and that we lead with those values first. And the tough conversations as a young man definitely aren't the conversations that I have now that are tough. I did it with a little bit more aggression. And that was mainly due to a lack of self confidence. And I see a lot of other business leaders struggling through being the people pleaser, and they also become micromanagers. And then the next thing you know, they are saying, you're not doing it right. Let me show you how to do it. And what it teaches the employees is that they don't have to step up. And I think that that's actually missing in society right now. Would you agree to that?
Absolutely. I made a video a few weeks ago, and I also made a PDF, actually, that's free for download, about how to successfully and effectively delegate. And it includes what you just said, right? You want to not just delegate for your own benefit, but also for that of your team. Your team will benefit if you allow them to step up, as you just said.
How do you hold them accountable when they're unaware of their speed of play or their lack of staying on target? How do you help them do that?
Well, I think, first of all, you got to establish some system or mechanism for feedback, and really don't only provide feedback when the time for the year-end review comes. It should be an ongoing process. It should be as smooth as possible. We also always want to really be clear and transparent of what's expected. Sometimes it's a lack of clarity in communication that causes this problem, actually, and that often comes from the leader side, right? If I don't know what's expected from me, and if I don't know what else I actually am allowed to contribute, because I've never been encouraged to contribute more, or I think I might be put down or just ignored, then I won't do it. And I think communication is just the central piece in there. And of course, we talk a lot about trust building when it comes to leadership. Trust is built in so many ways. It's not just through verbal communication. You also build trust through your energy, through your presence, through how you show up, through your attitude as a leader. And people see you all the time, and they observe you. And sometimes our own perception of how we are perceived is not the same as how we are actually perceived by others, right? So self-awareness, yes, is a big item of self-leadership, which is the basis for all leadership.
Talking about presence and showing up,
Mhm.
I meet so many entrepreneurs that have taken such a big chunk of the elephant that they can't chew it, and their energy starts to wane. And instead of focusing on pillars of life that create harmony and or balance, I don't really believe in balance. I believe in harmony.
Yeah.
But they start focusing more and more and more on work. And then what ends up happening is their energy depletes and that presence stops showing up. And I think that's when the wolves start to encircle the camp a little bit. And the wolves in this case would just be the attitudes of the employees. If the leader doesn't care, I don't have to care. If she doesn't show up on time, I don't have to show up on time. And the leader ends up getting more and more and more frustrated. So these systems that we're talking about, I believe, are not only in creating communication, which that's a beautiful one. I think it's also in just creating the expectations that you were talking about a moment ago of how something should go. My question is this: how do you properly help someone who is making the same critical error over and over again, but they have a good attitude? Do you always have to fire them? Is there a way to communicate with them? Is there a step-by-step process that you use to help them become aware that maybe they're not performing at the highest level?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say I totally agree with you that it's not about balance, but about harmony. I also never use the word work-life balance. It's just not part of my vocabulary. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's in that case, I would more talk about priorities. And I think it's also actually important in this conversation, this question that you asked me. Priorities are important to know about, not just it's not just the leader who needs to know about priorities, but also the team. So one thing to answer your question more concretely is to, of course, have a one-on-one conversation, right? And
Mhm.
really sit down and ask questions. I think what we don't do enough is ask questions and ask open-ended questions about what their aspirations are, what their challenges are as they perceive them, not as we perceive them. And yes, and what's really going on in their minds,
Mm.
what's in their potential we haven't even looked at, because it may not have been written in their job description that they might be able to contribute. And sometimes it's also about shifting tasks around in the team, because sometimes it's not the exact right job description for that person. There's one piece that they just really cannot handle well because it's not within their strengths, or because maybe they haven't had the training. Okay, then that's of course a different approach. And then you got to provide that training. But it's also sometimes about really asking those questions, asking them if they had they do it. These are questions I think that we can get some valuable input from, and then we can have a better idea of whether this works or not. And then, the next conversation, and then of course define next steps and a follow-up process. Now, if then it still doesn't work, then at least the process has become more transparent. I think it's easier for both parties to part ways in peace, in harmony, as you said, and to just really move on to the next chapter on both sides, because sometimes that's a necessary step.
Do you also often find that the SOPs of a company are not, when the leaders are coming to you and saying, I want to perform at a higher level, do you find that either A, the SOPs are not clearly defined, written down, understood by everyone, or they're just not operating in them from leadership down? Is that also a challenge?
Yeah, I think in my ideal world, everyone would be more involved in the determination of everything, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's just say, for example, you have a small business and you have a vision. Okay, now you're hiring somebody, then of course you already have your vision. But let's assume you're building your team and you have a project. So you have the overarching vision, and then you have a project. You could still create a mini vision for this project together with your team. So if they are involved in really creating the vision for that team and then setting the goals and the milestones for it together, then there will automatically be greater accountability. You will have greater buy-in. And I think that's the same with everything. Involve people more in your SOP, maybe even also.
Yes. One of the greatest lessons that I was taught, and it was not even by a coach, it was from a realtor that had been in business longer than me. And I said, man, I got my outline for my SOPs. This was years ago. I got my outline for my SOPs written down, but I just do not have the energy to write them. And this was for my remodeling company. And he said, Chris, you're not supposed to write your SOPs. Each department head writes their SOP and then submits it to you for you to review and tweak. And that's how you actually make the SOPs come alive inside of your company. And it was the greatest sigh of relief that I have ever given. And it's exactly what it did, because when I would review it, I would see the things that were out of order from, I started as a small business, and as we grew, that, we're missing a critical element. And that critical element follows all the way down for collecting the last paycheck and admin and everything. What are some of the tips and tricks that you have helped, simple things that you have helped people with to better optimize their business concerning leadership?
Yeah. So I'm not a business coach, right? So I focus on leadership. I really like the methodology and the tools of conversational intelligence.
Okay.
I don't know if you're aware of that specific methodology.
Oh, let us know.
Yeah. Okay, so I have added that to my own frameworks that I have developed, right? So I've developed my own coaching frameworks, and one of them is really very much focused on self-leadership. I think when we master self-leadership, everything else becomes easier because we also automatically transmit something that we don't have to say every day to our team, right? We model our own leadership and that leadership of self. Another one, for example, is new paradigm leadership, which is really about, yes, bringing in new paradigms into leadership, but really also considering the factor heart, all aspects of communication, not just the verbal communication, which is more inherent in the conversational intelligence methodology, which is also a lot about trust building, of course. But because I think we were talking about energy before, so I want to pick that up again, because
Okay.
when we talk about energy, it's not just about the level of energy; it's also about the quality of energy.
The frequency of it.
The frequency of it, the way we constantly communicate on an energetic level, whether we are aware of that or not. It just happens.
Yep.
Why do we not pay more attention to that? And
So we're
this
not
is something, sorry?
because we're not taught.
Exactly. And this is something I talk to my clients about. How can you optimize this energy before you go into a meeting, into a negotiation, into whatever it is? Also, I talk a lot about a self-empowering mindset and heart set as part of my frameworks. And I believe that sometimes we underestimate our intuition. We underestimate this connection with our hearts as leaders, which can actually give us courage. It can give us greater intuition. It can give us so many, many valuable strengths in leadership, valuable, what should I call it, qualities in leadership that we can apply. And we talk about these things as well, right? And then, of course, yes, it's a lot about mindset. You know that because you also coach people in mindset. I like to go very deep with mindset. So I've studied a lot of holistic modalities, which have helped me understand it better and bring it into this coaching approach. A lot of my clients deal with a lot of stress. I think that's definitely a big challenge for a lot of people, anxiety. And I work with them to reduce the stress level. And I also give them tools to deal with stress in the moment whenever necessary.
One of the biggest things, speaking on what you're speaking on, I want to. So, number one, my wife, if I walk into the home,
Mhm.
she knows exactly what's going on from the energy that I'm putting out. I don't have to say a word.
Yep.
So much so that it used to be very annoying because I didn't take the 5 minutes to tap the tree and leave my day there before I walked in the house. Over time, we started studying energy together.
Mhm.
And the thing that I realized that I was hitting on it a little bit earlier is that I wasn't giving me permission to dream big enough. Very, very
Mhm.
simple. And I think a lot of leaders end up taking on a lot of stress because they start living in what they call reality. And by the way, there are a lot of realities, not just the one that we're perceiving. And that's when you talk about these paradigm shifts that people can go
Mhm.
through. And what I started realizing for me, and maybe this is helpful for other leaders too, is that I created all of this. I created the relationship. I created the home. I created the lack or abundance of money. I created the good or the bad employees. I create everything that's in my life. I'm responsible for it all. And all I have to do is reset and ask myself a new question, which is, what do I really want? Because I think most leaders forget to ask for what they want. Well, if you don't know where you are and you don't know where you're going, how on earth do you expect to get there? And that's where the stress starts. Do you have anything that you would like to add to that?
Absolutely. I so agree with you. That's one of the questions I ask my clients all the time. What do you really, really want deep down in your heart? What is it that you would prefer right now? Because a lot of people know what they should want, but they don't really know what they truly want. And they haven't really spent enough time or reflection to ask this question, answer this question. That's why connecting to your heart is so important as well. And you're right. Your energy speaks louder and faster than your words before you even say a single word. We already feel it. Sometimes also at a networking event, you feel somebody coming in through the door and they attract all the views, although they have not said one single word. Why is that? Well, it's because of their energy. And they might do this
Go ahead.
intentionally or not. Right?
Well, that's one of the most beautiful things. You've spoken on stage, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I've done quite a bit of it too. And I used to study scripts so that I said my speech exactly like I wanted to.
Mhm.
I'm to the place now, Regina, where I don't, except for the subject that we're going to talk about, I don't have anything written down. I used to even just do bullet points and then I went away from that entirely. What I focused on 100%, is grounding me, being fully present, and I am up here to share and give my love to you. And this is what's beautiful in a crowd. If you do that, they reflect it right back to you and it becomes this transformational conversation. And I'm always having a conversation with one person. It's never everyone, it's one person. And I found it to be that people don't remember what I say to them. They remember exactly how I made them feel in that moment. And that's what I love about, that's why I do podcasts. I meet new people and I get to know who they are. It's why I love networking. It's why I love building businesses. It's why I love going on trips and trying new things. And I know in my heart that if people would dream a dream that they feel is impossible to accomplish, but they know that they know that they know that it's that nagging thing that they deserve, that I believe our world would start to transform in a much, much better way. What got you into helping people do this? Why this? Because you have to be a very unique person to want to coach people through this.
Yes. I want to also say that I absolutely agree with you that we create everything, that we are truly the center of the universe, right? As some people say. And I don't know if you are familiar also with Brian Ridgway. He talks about that a lot too.
No.
Yeah, I just actually found him pretty recently.
Okay.
And when I found him, I said, "This guy speaks my language, and you do too." so, and we all say it's still in our own way, but it's very. I get exactly what you're saying. So, what made me do this? Well, I really, I'm. Are you familiar with human design?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I'm an well, and then in the new version of human design, it's called an initiator. In the traditional one, it's called a manifester. So I always, I like to initiate stuff.
I'm a
I like.
generator. I'm a generator. Like most of the world, I'm a generator.
Okay. We need all of them, and we all. Because if we only have initiators, the world doesn't function. If we only have generators, it doesn't function, right?
Right.
So we it's quite natural for me to want to do my own thing, okay, and it's moved a little bit around. I'm also easily bored. We talked about being bored before, right?
Yep.
I like that variety. I thrive in it. So I've traveled a lot. In the last few years, I've traveled more on the African continent. I've also done some speaking there, taught some workshops where sometimes it was even just an exchange of accommodation for a workshop of a week, and
Sure.
sometimes, and so I just love doing all these different things and connecting with people that I believe I can really that want to create that change for themselves and that I believe I can help. And I think that is a beautiful thing to do. And I'm not putting myself on a on a higher level in any way. It's not meant in an arrogant way. We all do it in our own way. I mean, if you are an electrician who comes to fix my bathroom light, which happens to not work, then at that moment, you're helping me, right? Yeah. So it doesn't matter. This is just what I like doing. I also, according to all these different tests like human design and whatnot, I am a natural teacher and whatnot, and coach. So it must be somewhere in there, right? And then of course, one thing I really truly enjoy as well is I have always drawn naturally diverse clients. And again, there's a variety, right? It's a very selfish thing, which is not a bad thing. Selfish is good. Right. So and that comes with that multinational and multilingual background, because I can also actually coach in several different languages when necessary. So that keeps it also interesting, right? And then, of course, the coaching itself, it evolves. It's not stagnant, and this is what I enjoy about it too. It's my coaching today is not the same as it was 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's not, because we all constantly evolve, and I add on more knowledge, I add on more experience. We hopefully get a little wiser.
Well, that's how I coach. So I'm 51 this month, and I've been a business owner for such a long time. I've made so many mistakes, but I've constantly evolved because I didn't like the position that I was in. It wasn't because I dreamt bigger. It's because I literally couldn't attain the dream that I had right here. And over time, I saw me more as a mentor and less of a coach. And what I mean by that is, I think coaches can teach you. Let's use a football analogy. A coach can say, run 10 yards forward and then take a right and hold your hands out and catch the ball, and then run up the field. And if you don't do it, they'll drill you on that until you do that properly. Whereas I believe a mentor can say, hey, you can't make it 10 yards in the amount of time that you need to. Why don't we go 7 yards, zig left, zig right, and then be ready to catch the ball? So a mentor can take their experiences, see where you are. And if you're on level 2, they don't teach you level 4 yet. They come back to level 2. And that's what I believe you are, as a mentor, not a coach, because you have given yourself the opportunity to have so many experiences, and you're a heart-centered person, which means you're connecting to people in ways that they probably aren't even aware of while you're doing it, that you're able to use your intuition to have conversations with them that maybe you don't even know why you're doing it. And it's that exploratory, this happens to me a lot, by the way. It's an exploratory process, and they go, oh my God, you're speaking my language. And you're like, cool, that's what you're paying me for, because I can tap in.
Right.
And I can help you become the better version of you instead of another version of me. Is that
absolutely true? Totally true. I do think it depends a little bit on how we define coach and mentor. Sometimes people have different definitions, and I've thought about this too a lot. But yes, it's true. And I also am known for working quite intuitively. I'm known for my holistic and multidisciplinary approach. And oftentimes it really seems like, okay, this just literally fell out of thin air into my mind or whatever. And we sometimes say we channel, well, whatever it is, right? We pick it up from consciousness.
Yeah.
And it just speaks through us, and we don't even have to think about it. Yes, I have that experience too.
The arrogance of humans to think that our levels of perception, we have 6 senses, intuition being the 6th, and smell, sight, you hear all that. For us to be arrogant enough to think that we see all that is one of the craziest things that I've ever considered. It's my fun life has been, Regina, exploring what I don't know. It's scary, but on the other side of that experience comes a perception that I never had before, and it allows me to feel closer to everything. So I'm a singularity guy. I bring everything back down to baseline stuff, because that's just how I operate. When I'm able to connect in all of these different ways, it all just comes down to the ability for me to rise my vibrational frequency. And inside of that frequency, I have supreme control of only one thing, my ability to generate that frequency. And everything else comes to me as it's supposed to. I just need to know where to tap in and how to tap in. But if I've never been at an 800 level, I don't know how to tap in at an 800 level, and I need to be shown how to do that. And there are so many beautiful things in this world now that people are opening themselves up to, instead of being so close-minded, that I believe that the curve is exponential for humans to actually become aware that we have a lot more potential senses out there than we give credit for. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So we hear a lot of the negative stuff all the time because there's just so much,
Yeah.
it's there's so much contrast right now. And the more we know about what's going on, the starker the contrast even appears. Now, I also do believe that at the same time, there is so much more. It's all consciousness, right? So I wouldn't say more consciousness because everything is consciousness, but yeah, sometimes the language does limit us a little bit in expressing these ideas. However, I just believe that there's more awareness, and that people are, sometimes people call it, fast evolution. I don't know if that's the right word, frankly, but I do see that there's a lot of, sometimes we call it awakening, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot going on in that positive direction as well, right?
I know
So
that
people,
people I know that people, because of the reptilian brain, are afraid of
Mhm.
change a lot of times,
Right.
but I have a lot of very eclectic friends that are coaches,
Mhm.
that are very holistic, that are very
Mhm.
they're not traditionally spiritual.
Mhm.
Um, and they call it the fifth dimension is opening up. And this idea that we are transforming to something better, you have to make a choice.
Mhm.
Even with all that's going on in the media, everybody
Mhm.
listening to this, listen, you have to make a
Mhm.
choice. Either
Mhm.
it's going to get better or it's going to get worse. Choose.
Mhm.
And whatever you choose, don't look back,
Mhm.
because that's the division that I see that is happening. It is not something bad that is happening. It's we are becoming a better version of what we are, that we've always meant to be. And all of these hundreds of thousands of years have helped us get here. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there are several different, theories around that, or beliefs.
Yep.
In the end, uh, again, it's all about your belief, because you're creating your reality. So yes, what is the reality that you're going to create? The universe is recreated, I forgot now how many times in a second. So we have that opportunity to create something new uh, all the time, right? So yes, it's very possible, because of course I'm in this human body right now with a little bit of a limited imagination
Mhm.
compared to the spiritual being that we also are. And uh and uh I you said eclectic, right? So
Yeah.
I consider myself a little bit eclectic too, because I have a very eclectic background. I call it that, actually. Usually it's very, very mixed up. And the so I've looked into a lot of different, like, what I call theories, and this is certainly one of them, which could be very possible. And then there's also, like, the other possibility that, because you are the center of the universe, you're just like, it's all there is. So I don't know how the two would fit together. It's a really complex conversation. And we could talk about this probably all day. But so I'm playing with it.
I think that's probably the most important thing, is to remember that even though we're supposed to be grown-ups, we're constantly children in the sandbox,
Mhm.
creating the
Yeah.
castle that we want. And it's okay to break it back down and build another castle when you no longer want to.
Mhm.
I very much agree with you. you know, when we started discovering that there are worlds inside of worlds inside of worlds, inside of a raindrop is a whole nother world, inside of a molecule is a whole nother world. We're getting into quantum physics and mechanics, and this is something that was theory a long time ago, and actually it wasn't. It was proven, but nobody was talking about it. Now it's mainstream. We can believe it. With that being said, you are, and it's such a hard concept for people because we've been taught that you're actually a slave. We've been taught that there's this hierarchy. Even if you're a Christian, it says in the Bible that God was first himself, and he was kind of wanted to experience himself. So he created things. And that's a very good metaphor for exactly who and what we are, that God is actually inside of us. And that is something that people wanted. And oh, it's so controversial sometimes, but people want to displace it so that they don't have to take responsibility for it. And that's why we as coaches or mentors or whatever you want to call it, we keep reminding people that actually it's all your fault. The good, the bad, everything. Take responsibility.
And maybe instead of fault, it's just like, you know, it's just what you created.
Right.
You know, so that they take the blame out of it, and then they can just say, okay, well, now what do you want to create that's better? What's your preferred reality? Now let's look at that, right? And then just like, yeah. And yes, the responsibility part, I totally agree with that. If you really truly embody the belief that you have created everything, and you create everything, including what you don't like or who you don't like, then then you know, your perspective changes, but it also gives you that freedom. Those two go hand in hand, the responsibility and the freedom. There is no freedom if you are a victim, or if your God is outside of you because you're waiting to be somehow salvaged, or
yeah,
you
and
know,
you used the word, and I did not want to use it first. I wanted it to come out, but that is the truth. Playing the victim role is what is being propagated inside of every media that exists right now to do one thing: to keep people in general enslaved. Because there's nothing you can do about it when you're the victim except fight and get angry. And that is a low vibration frequency that only produces more fear, anger, distrust, separation. The biggest thing about humans that we've done that no other mammal has done is we've learned how to live together in civilizations. All other mammals live together in these small little populations. And we have to evolve past that to learn. We need to operate at a much higher level of belief. I tell you what, if people wanted to get in touch with you, to have a conversation with you, what's the best way that they could do that?
Well, they can, of course, reach me through my website, transformyourperformance.com. That's also the name of my business, transformyourperformance.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I also have a LinkedIn newsletter that I publish every week. Just published a new article today. And yeah, and I have a YouTube channel at Regina Huber. And then, of course, there are my books on Amazon. One is about to come out. One is already there. The book that's already published is Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine. And the book that is launching soon, and I just finished writing, I put a lot of thought of what we just talked about into it, actually, I think as well, apart from my eclectic adventures and stories and the lessons I learned from those stories and experiences for the leadership of myself and the leadership of others. And this book is actually called Living My Freaking Amazing Life.
I love it.
And the subtitle is Create the Life That's Perfect for You Anywhere in the World.
I love it. Well, when you decide to when you come back, you're going to come back to New York to visit?
Yes. And either New York or Miami, because I also spent some time in Miami before I came here.
Let me know personally when you come back to New York. I'm near Boston, so it would be fun to visit with you and follow your adventures. We're going to put all of your information on the title page of the podcast show, so people know exactly how to contact you. And Regina, I had an amazing conversation with you. Thank you so much for showing up.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. And this has been awesome. I know we could have gone on for like hours.
These are the conversations that I love, and I just appreciate so much for how you're showing up as a human being. It encourages everyone that listens that they can live a better life. So everybody, we'll see you in the trenches. Take care.
I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree. There's roots where I stand.
Hey friend, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please leave a review and subscribe to catch future casts. If you really enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it so others can benefit from it as well. I'll see you in the trenches.
Try to catch me howling at the moon.